All right, well, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our program tonight. I want to welcome you all to the Columbia Museum of Art. I see some friendly faces, familiar faces. Harriet does as well, who's one of our guests tonight. If you're a museum member, a special welcome to you. And if you're not a member of the museum, we hope you'll consider being one after tonight's program. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight's program is called Craft in America, a conversation with Carol Sauvion, Harriett Green, and myself, Jackie Adams. I'm the Director of Art and Learning here at the Columbia Museum of Art, and I have the pleasure of holding tonight's conversation with two very special guests. And I have to admit, I'm going to have some fan moments throughout this conversation because I'm a huge fan of the PBS Craft in America series. But Harriett Green is joining us. Carol Sauvion is joining us tonight. So just sit back, relax, enjoy some conversation. Before we get started, though, I just want to give a special shout out to some folks in town who loaned us these really awesome mid-century chairs for our staging tonight. Bert Easter at Easter Antiques with the Red Lion Antique Mall, which is just up the road on Hampton Street. I've heard really great things about this vendor, and he loaned us these amazing chairs. So I just want to shout that person out. Please go visit Red Lion and visit Easter's Antiques. So thank you so much. Before we get started, as per usual, I'm going to do a little introduction of each of my guests to give you a little background on who they are and where they have been in their careers. Our guest, Harriett Green, has worked as a passionate arts professional throughout South Carolina for the last 4 decades. If you know Harriett, you know she is always on fire with some really great ideas. She served as a former visual arts director for the South Carolina Arts Commission from 1992 to 2021. And prior to her time with the commission, Green held a special position here at the Columbia Museum of Art. She was a former registrar and an assistant curator here at the CMA from 1980 to 1988. So she knows our collection very well. Over the last 40 plus years, Green has gotten to know many artists across state, regional, national, and global communities. She's familiar with museum collections, artists, collectors, and she is a leader in supporting artist development through dozens of fundraising, funding, exhibition, educational, and programmatic initiatives. She's quite the person to know in the state. She also serves as a Board of Trustees member for the American Craft Council, which you're going to hear a little bit more about from Harriett, and she currently offers her expertise as a visual arts consultant. So Harriett, welcome.
Thank you.
Our next guest, Carol Sauvion, who flew in yesterday from Los Angeles, is an American craft scholar and patron. She is the executive producer and director of the award-winning documentary series, Craft in America, which is available for viewing online, but it's also broadcast across PBS stations around the United States, including our very own PBS affiliate, South Carolina ETV, which we're so proud of. In 2003, Sauvion created the Craft in America 501c3 to promote and advance original handcrafted work through educational programs. Their mission is to document and advance original handcrafted work through programs in all media accessible to all. They are dedicated to exploration, preservation, and celebration of craft, the work of the hand, and their impact on our nation's cultural heritage. Then in 2007, she created the Craft in America documentary series, which has become a very popular and beloved series, and then followed up in 2009 with the Center for Craft located in Los Angeles, where she features rotating exhibitions and educational programming and resources. In addition to her active slate of Craft in America projects, Carol also serves with Harriett on the American Craft Council Board of Trustees, and you're going to hear some pretty dynamic things coming out of the ACC very shortly. Harriett, Carol, thank you so much for being here to learn more about Craft in America.
Thank you for inviting me. Forgot my mic.
So
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. Before we dive into the conversation, I want to let the audience know that you're going to hear about a couple of different organizations and resources that showcase craft around the country. You're going to hear about Craft in America, Carol's organization. You're going to hear about the American Craft Council, and you're going to hear and see more about their publication, American Craft, an award-winning magazine that's published all over and distributed all over the U.S. And then finally, we're going to round out with a very exciting initiative that they're going to share more insight with you for the year 2026. And then we're going to open it up for some question and answer for you all to engage our guests and any burning questions you might have. All right. So good little introduction there. And we're going to kick off with some questions. So I really wanted to start this conversation with the idea of relationships and connections. These two are very good at building relationships and making connections in the craft world. And I know that you two are involved in some of the organizations that I just listed and projects at the national level to showcase craft. So I thought we'd open up the conversation by having you guys talk a little bit about those organizations and how they support the field of craft. And Carol, we're going to start with you and Craft in America.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First of all, I want to say hello to everyone, and I'm glad we're all together here to talk about my favorite topic, which is craft. And frankly, I've driven a lot of people crazy talking about it, but I think you people want to hear about it, so this is exciting. I'd like to thank Jackie Adams for inviting us to be here this evening, and Wilson Boehm. I know Wilson's here, who has been so helpful with all the details, including this afternoon's AV test, which was really important. I want to thank Harriett Green, a fellow craft lover, for the work that we're doing together and for all the work you've done in South Carolina. It's rare to be with somewhere where everywhere you go, they know her. And that's this thing about Columbia, certainly. I'm just going to give you a brief description of our work at Craft in America, and I want to start out with just a little clip, just a little series of short clips from our series.
Making things with your hands, it's a human instinct.
I like this process because it is so physical.
There's a communion between the object maker and the material that he or she is working with.
For hundreds of years, we were singing with our voices, we were making instruments.
You have to know your medium to express your heart, to make art.
Thank you. And then, Wilson, I think we're ready for the next image, and I think many of you will know who this is. I'm going to begin my presentation with a photograph of the Charleston artist Mary Jackson, her daughter, April, and her granddaughter, Imari, weaving sweetgrass baskets. And this photo was taken in 2006. Mary was in the first episode of Craft in America, which was entitled Memory. And I say this because I want you to know that South Carolina has been very important to the Craft in America series. Next slide, please. And this is an image from a recent shoot we had in Grand Marais, Minnesota, at the North House Folk School. We're doing an episode called Home, and here we see people taking a timber frame class, learning actually how to make a home, so very exciting. Next slide, please. And there we have Maddie Leeser. We have produced 29 hours so far of programming for PBS, and our programs air nationwide, and they are the basis for a lot of other aspects of our work for ancillary projects. So this is Maddie Leeser, and she's working on a sculpture. She'll be featured in the upcoming Inspiration episode. So the two new episodes are Home and Inspiration, and they will air on the 16th of December. Now, I'm not sure, we air nationwide, but we don't have what's called common carriage. So it may not air that day here, so please check your local listings. And now next we have Sid Carpenter, and she's in our Home episode. And she is very interesting. She is doing a series. You see her building a house there. She's doing a series of bowls, and she's dealing with the land, the African American farmers in the South, and some who have kept their land, and what it means to them. So it's very important. Her work there is very important. I have to tell you, ETV here in Columbia has a special place in my heart. My brother, Joe Sauvion, if he hasn't left, he's here somewhere, has worked at ETV since the 1970s. Joe is the artist in our family, and filmmaking is his medium. I'm glad he's here with us this evening. Next slide, please. This is a slide from our website, which is craftedamerica.org. And this is an essential aspect of what we do because we make the films, but we want them to be available. We feel like they're evergreen and they should be available. So we have a website where you can watch all the episodes for free and a lot of clips, hundreds of clips, artist bios, and a library of artist talks. Here you see the episode icons that can be clicked on to access the videos. So if you click on Democracy, on the piece by Terry Greaves, you'll get to the Democracy episode. Next, please. The Craft in America website also houses our education guides, which are used in classrooms across the country. The guides were especially valuable during the pandemic because people used them for their Zoom classes, so we were happy about that. Next, please. Here we have, it looks like a bunch of yellow dots, but this is our resources map on our website, and you can look things up according to artist, according to school, different locations. So if you're traveling and you want to know what can I see in Maine, if you go to this resource guide, you'll have a lot of ideas. Next, please. And this is an exhibition at our center. The Craft in America Center is in Los Angeles, and it's our bricks and mortar space. It's a place where you can actually go. We have a library of about 1,000 books. We have education programs. We have lots of things. You can immerse yourself in the handmade there. These visitors are enjoying sculpture by Gerardo Monterrubio, who was part of a exhibition we had, about 2 or 3 years ago called Mono Made, and it was the Getty Pacific Standard Time initiative, LALA, Los Angeles, Latin America. So it was to show the influences that we've had on each other. It was very interesting. Okay, next please. And here's just a lecture. We have lectures at our center. And these were restaurateurs in Los Angeles who use handmade plates and dishes in their restaurants, talking about the artists who made them and why they think that's important. So, next please. We're very, very proud of our outreach to 7 Los Angeles Unified School District schools. Students are always excited to meet working artists and perhaps consider a career in the arts for themselves. And a lot of these kids have never even been to a gallery, so it's really thrilling for them. Very exciting. Next, please. Workshops have become so popular. I'm sure people here have taken workshops. We stopped, obviously, because of the pandemic, but after that 2-year hiatus, we've started again and having to have several of the same workshop because people so want to take them. And then this is my last image, and this is the front of the center, which you can see is very modest. It's a storefront. It's actually 3 storefronts, but it's modest. But we were very excited recently to receive a visit from the Contemporaries Affinity Group from the Columbia Museum of Art, along with Michael Neumeister, your curator, who was so knowledgeable and was thrilling to have them. And my closing sentence is, I hope this is just the beginning of a friendship between the Columbia Museum of Art and Craft in America. So thank you.
Carol,
Okay.
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That gives you a little taste and a little introduction to what all the projects that you do through Craft in America. And there's other organizations in our country that do this work profoundly well. And Harriet, I thought you could talk a little bit about an organization, a council that is so active, the American Craft Council. And tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how they support the field of craft.
Okay. As Jackie mentioned earlier, both Carol and I are on the board of trustees, and a lot of people have heard about the Penland School of Craft, yeah? And you've heard a lot about Lucy Morgan, who was the founder of Penland in 1929. She was affectionately known as Miss Lucy. It's kind of folksy and lovable. But a lot of people have never heard about another person whose name is Eileen Osborne Wells. And she was the founder of the American Craft Council. Ms. Webb was described as an aristocrat. She was from the Northeast. But she loved craft and was very influential, along with Miss Lucy, in the craft movement in this country. So the two of them, having started this 2 decades apart, one during the Great Depression, and they were able to actually create a foundation for what we all see today and what's happening in small communities and large urban centers, in museums, small and large. And so there's some craft artists sitting in the audience today. I see Sally sitting there. And I see other members of this community who have visited Penland. I see Chris and Tom, and I think I saw Martha. Is Martha Brim here? There's Martha Brim, who is a regular visitor to Penland. So let me tell you a little bit about Penland for those of you. Oh, forgot about you. You always at the Penland auctions. I'm sorry, I forgot. You were sitting on the front row. At any rate, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our mission, tell you about a few of our programs. I'll highlight one of the ones that are sort of displayed on the back table, and feel free to take one of those magazines when you leave. And so I'll get started. Now, I apologize for having to use note cards, but can't remember things like I used to. So the American Craft Council is a national organization, and we are based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In prior years, we were based in New York. I do enjoy going to Minneapolis, but I would have loved to have been going to New York for these meetings that we have. Anyway, our mission is to connect and galvanize diverse craft communities to advance craft and the impact it has in contemporary life. Now, some of you have seen me drinking from this handmade mug, and it has a little bell in it, so when it's empty, it's a call to bring more, whatever you're drinking. So craft can be fun and interactive, and this is a good example of that. Craft can also be enclosed in a vitrine in a museum collection, not to be touched, but to be enjoyed and looked at. So there's a whole lot of craft in this room, so hope you'll get to spend a few times with that. We operate in 4 pillars, and I'll run through those very quickly, and I'll tell you a little bit about one of them or 2 of them a little bit more in detail. So the first pillar is creative economies, and what that really is about entrepreneurship. And we do that through live and online craft marketplace shows. We will be going to one in a couple of weeks in St. Paul. And lots of craft artists from around the country will be there, and they will be selling their art. It's where a lot of curators go to find art that they may want to purchase, and collectors, of course. I feel like I've got my back turned to this group. She's saying, let's move. I like that. She's saying, let's move so my back's not turned. Thank you. That's much better. Thank you. Another one is stewardship and legacy, and that is our library and archives. A third pillar is social impact and Community, where we try to amplify and support the craft community. And there's one called Public Voice for Craft, and that is our magazine, which you'll hear a little bit more in detail about. So with the creative community, creative economies, we rebrand our craft shows and started calling them American Craft Made. So that's basically the shows. We used to have 4 of those. Lynn was always a regular visitor to those craft shows, and they were in Baltimore, St. Paul, San Francisco, and Atlanta. We now operate only 2 of these craft shows. St. Paul and Baltimore is the flagship, and it'll never go away. I'm sure Sally's participated. If not, you should think about it, Sally. Just a little statistics about the American Craft Made. 40,000 attendees, and that's all I'll say. The Library and Archives is a research library that's over 65 years old. 20,000 books in exhibition catalogs, 3,000 artist files, and 100 periodicals about making art. Pretty impressive. Okay. I think we're ready for the next slide. So this is the cover of 4 magazines. At some point beginning during the pandemic, we decided to, well, I say we, the staff, that creative staff at American Craft Council, decided to rebrand around what builds a craft community. And so each of these catalogs, these magazines, really address issues that are happening in the craft community. So the first one, which launched it was called Nourish. Nourish is about how craft sustains us and how artists nurture their work. Now, everybody's seen how an artist handles clay, yeah? It's like, it's really, they hold it, they caress it, they do all kind of wonderful things with clay, and other media as well. Kinship, which is how we are connected through the craft, how traditional craft is passed down. I see Jane Prisby from McKissick Museum, and she could tell you about that, having been focusing on that in their museum for some time. Gather, how do we create communities? Is there any potter in here? Any potters? No? Oh, I see one potter. I don't know who you, I can't tell from here, but kiln openings. Kiln openings are a perfect example of gathering. When that kiln opens, to see just what comes out of that kiln. Was it successful? Was it a failure? But there's excitement about that. And finally, the idea of wonder. Wonder is that craft that awes, surprises, delights, and make you think. So we were pleased to discover that Amanda McCavour's work is in that particular magazine issue. Now, you have not seen it, but I have a copy of it here if anyone would like to flip through this at the end. We also would like to say that we're very proud of that magazine issue, and it just won both an Eddie and an Ozzie Award in New York recently. And this is the issue. This issue is the one that did the Wonder issue. I think that's all I have to say about American so far. You know, you never know what I'll say later.
Yeah, we got a little entranced there, Harriet. And I think it's important to overview these resources because it shows that craft in the U.S. is not a siloed field. They're not off on their own doing, there's an ecosystem, there's a support system, it's financial, it's interdependent, it's relationships, and that idea of community is coming up over and over again. And if you're a practicing craft artist or know craft art makers, you understand where this language is coming from, where these definitions are coming from. So the idea of definition, craft is seen all throughout the world. You know, every country has their unique culture of craft. But For you two, how would you define craft, particularly in the U.S.? It has quite a history, but I thought maybe, Harriet, you could shed some insight. You've thought about this a little bit. Where do you think craft is defined in the U.S.?
I think, Wilson, it's time for another slide. So I think when I think about craft, I think about both tradition and innovation and how there's a hybrid. Sometimes it's purely about traditions that's passed down from one generation to the other. Sometimes it's about tradition that's pushed beyond its boundaries. And sometimes it's truly about innovation. And I think an example of that is Amanda's work. It is truly about innovation. So let's we're going to run through a few slides that I think illustrates that. First, we have Mary Jackson. For those of you who have been to the Gibbs Museum of Art, the piece on the left is in the Mary Jackson Gallery. And it is her magnum opus, I think, as far as she's concerned, because I don't think she could ever do another basket like that. It is a large basket. Is it about 3 feet wide, Beryl or Jane? Yes, it's big. And as you can see, it's based on a traditional form, but she's taken it a little bit further and made it much more sculptural. The piece on the right is actually called Tulips and is part of the South Carolina Arts Commission State Art Collection. And at the time, that piece was considered beginning to approach on the sculptural aspects of it. The handle on that piece is sweeping and beautiful. That photo is not really doing it justice, but it is an amazing piece. The next piece is by an artist named Elizabeth Keller, who, when I met her, she was a student at Clemson University. I have to tell this story. When I saw the piece, I wanted to purchase it personally, but it was also something that the State Art Collection Acquisitions Committee wanted to purchase. So you know we can't compete with institutions where we work. So I had to give up that piece. But it is one of my favorite pieces in the State Art Collection. There are many pieces in this, but this is one of my favorites. Now, this piece is made out of clay. It is as tall as I am, and it predates what Maina Hewitt and I were talking about earlier, because I was trying to remember, when did I first see the figuration in clay at McKissick Museum, which, I'm not at McKissick Museum, at McMaster Gallery, where Maina was the curator, or was the curator at the time. And when I saw that collection, Ron Porter and Joe Price's collection of figurative clay works, it was amazing. It was amazing, and kind of justified the piece that we had collected almost a decade earlier.
And you know, here I don't know if Joe Price and I don't know if they're here tonight with us. They're not, but they're fantastic craft collectors. We have some of their objects on display actually out in the atrium.
Yeah, we should point those out to you. It's wonderful. But that was a really fantastic show. So this piece sort of falls into that genre of figurative clay works, but it's just a spectacular piece. We have Beth Lipman, who's in Wisconsin. Beth creates these tablescapes. It's all glass. Every piece is handmade or blown, I guess, and they're based on still life paintings, Dutch 17th century still life paintings. And she is just one of the top craft artists in the country, and she actually is on the board with us, isn't she? Let's see the next image. The next image is by Elizabeth Brim. Martha, hold your hand up again. That's Martha's sister. Elizabeth is a well-known blacksmith, well known. And her works are really feminine in some ways, many ways, actually. And you don't expect to see a tutu, right? You don't expect to see a tutu made out of this type of material. And so it's just amazing for the craftsmanship, and it just sort of belies what you would think craft should be. I mean, it's just a great example, but at the same time, metal, tutu doesn't quite go, but it does. Is that the last one, Wilson? I'm not sure. Okay.
So thank you, Harriet. Thank you. Your knowledge is extensive, and it's great to see some examples of places and artists that you've gotten to work with. And I know, Carol, you take a little bit of a different angle there, but you sort of expand upon that definition a little bit. I love what the ACC has done with the branding, by the way. That looks really beautiful. Tell us a little bit about how you've come to define.
Jackie, when you asked about how I define craft, I didn't think of any particular objects. I thought of a lot of adjectives that, for me, define craft. One is accessible. It's something for everyone, and I think all of us have a craft story in our lives somewhere, a relative or even ourselves who makes things. So it's something for everyone. It's everywhere. The second thing, inclusive, and I think that goes along with it, that anyone can try it. And some people will like it, and maybe not everyone, but it includes everyone. From little children, and we know how important it is for kids, up until people, in their later years when they have time to have that kind of experience. I remember reading that when Jimmy Carter, who was a woodworker, lost the election, he went home and down into his woodworking studio and started making furniture. So there's something about it that's comforting, and that was the next thing I was going to say. I think we felt that, especially during the pandemic, when a lot of people turned to making things by hand, just for that feeling of comfort that comes from it. It's also diverse, so it comes from every corner of our country, of the world, really, and every kind of person, professionals, amateurs, young people, just everyone. There's someone who who makes things, which is, I think, exciting. It's educational. You learn things by making things with your hands that you don't learn any other way. That hand-eye, Sam Malouf used to say it was three things, the triune, the hand, the eye, and the heart. So that's the kind of thing that is important to me about craft. And then it's empowering. And I was telling a story earlier today. I started out as a potter in the late 60s, early 70s, and I thought to myself, if I can make plates, if I can make dishes, no matter what happens, I can at least have dishes. And then I thought, well, how will I fire them? There'll be nothing. But it didn't occur to me at the time. But there is a feeling of being able to do something. I know a lot of you, including my brother, have done work on your homes. You've built things. You've changed them. You've improved them. And there's something exciting about that, I think, for everybody. So. And there's a lot of history there, the history of quilts. There are many, many major stories in the craft world, quilts being one of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think many of us have familiar stories that go back into our own families, our ancestry, especially with textiles.
Yes.
Quilts is definitely a prominent one in the U.S. and across the seas, but we all have very significant touch points throughout our lives. And it's great to see that you think about heritage, tradition, and how it's evolved. Mm-hmm. And you know, how communities can train craft within a community, but then also there's more formal practitioners.
Absolutely.
Who become educated. So you're really embracing the full spectrum, which is really wonderful.
And we learn things about our history from objects that we don't learn any other way. There was a wonderful professor of material culture, he was at Yale for many years, named Jules Prown, and he was especially interested in folk art. But he said, objects are the only real events from history, because you can write about it, etc. But if you're holding a pot that was made 500 years ago, and you look at that pot, and you know how it was made. You know somebody either coiled it or turned it on a wheel, and how they decorated it and they fired it, and it's so similar and yet so unique. So I think we learn a lot about ourselves by what we make.
I feel like every time I touch a piece of handmade pottery, I feel like I've touched the soul, because you can feel so much of the hand in the object. And You might not know that person, but you feel like there is a physical connection there to a
Yes.
soul.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
speaking of history, you both are working on some pretty big ideas and initiatives and projects. You know, some of these resources that you share, these leadership positions that you share, the things that you have done in your careers. It's like, what else can you do? What's the next thing that you can take craft into and keep it going forward? I'm working on an exhibition right now for next summer on Catawba potters and the Catawba Indian Nation, which is in Rock Hill. So it's all around this idea of preservation, that they are still alive through their cultural heritage and their craft. So this project that you're going to tell us and introduce us to a little bit kind of speaks to this notion of history and heritage and where we're going to take this in the future. So I thought what we would do is tease this big project, this idea that's coming up, and then Carol and Harriet are going to tell us a little bit about it.
30 years ago, America celebrated the great traditions of the handmade. Year of American Craft 1993 documented how craftspeople, by continuing craft practices that have been passed down through the centuries, were helping to preserve American history. The White House Collection of American Craft, a spectacular exhibition of the finest handcrafted objects, opened at the White House in December of 1993. This was accompanied by an astonishing array of craft events nationwide. On the occasion of our country's semi-quincentennial, our 250th anniversary, it's time once again to celebrate the handmade. Much has changed in America since our beginnings, but the practice of making things by hand endures. Year of American Craft 2026 is a moment to reflect on the importance of original handcrafted work and to embrace the diversity of makers and making, past and present. It is a project brought forth by a group of dedicated professionals who believe in the unifying force of the handmade. America encompasses a wonderful diversity of cultures, customs, and crafts. 2026 will focus on the unique craft stories of each region of our country, told through its cherished objects. In the important sphere of education, Year of American Craft will offer the opportunity for interdisciplinary learning. Kindergarten through 12th grades are a special focus for the project, which has the desire to introduce the crafts as soon as children enter school. Additionally, there will be connections with colleges and universities, offering degrees or courses based in traditional craft materials, as well as new materials and technologies. Festivals and sales are vital to craft makers. We will partner with commercial, government, and arts organizations to advance the crafts and local creative economies. We will also work in the digital realm for broadened access to programs and sales. Museum exhibitions were a major focus during Year of American Craft 1993, and they will be again in 2026. We propose the design of one core exhibition linked to online programs. The exhibition will be diverse and inclusive, presenting the finest work being done in traditional, ethnic, and studio craft. We will encourage museums and craft centers nationwide to mount their own special exhibitions, which we will showcase on the Year of American Craft website. The Year of American Craft Committee hopes to publish a book to present the extraordinary range of crafts' presence in our nation. Everyone has a craft story. To capture these stories, Craft in America will produce a 3-part documentary series tying contemporary makers and objects to similar practices and objects from throughout our history, beginning with Indigenous peoples. Craft brings people of all backgrounds and beliefs together. Craft speaks with an authentic voice. It represents truth in materials and truth in process. Programs nationwide will honor American craft makers, then and now, pointing the way to a robust future for the crafts in the country. we invite you to partner with us to imagine and create Year of American Craft 2026.
Bumps. This is exciting. This is really exciting. When I heard a little bit about this, I couldn't wait to hear more. And you guys are some of the first people that get to hear a little bit more about where this idea came from, how it's shaping up, and where it's going to go. And we hope as the CMA we can be a really big part of this. So where did this begin? How did it even start?
Well, you can imagine that Harriett Green had something to do with that. And so we were on a Zoom for the American Craft Council, and we started talking about craft. And Harriet said, does anyone know about Year of American Craft 1993? And I said, I do, because we did a segment in our Democracy episode about it. And so Harriet said, we should do that again. And I said, that's a great idea, Harriet, we should. We sort of laid that out a little bit, and this is, at this point, aspirational. You're the first people. We put this little clip together for you because we wanted to see what people's reactions would be. This would be a 2026 initiative, so we do have time. We're hoping that we'll have a wonderful exhibition. We're hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that it will be in Washington, and it will be virtual as well. I think the difference between 1993 and now is the way that we can get the information out, so that's exciting. So Harriet, what do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to be very busy, and so will you. So I'll tell you a little bit about the structure of it. In 1992, then President George H.W. Bush signed a proclamation.
Yes.
Naming 1993 the Year of American Craft. So we had the support of the federal government, which then pushed that down to the states through the governor's offices, and they pushed that down to the state arts commissions and councils, who then pushed it down to local arts councils in the states throughout the United States. So there was this big celebration. Some of you may remember what the South Carolina project was. It was called Craft of the Carolinas. I know John Whitehead does because he was involved with helping us get that celebration at the Gibbs Museum in 1993, which was part of the national meetings for arts councils and commissions throughout the country. So we had a big audience for that. It was also the year that Jane Alexander became the director of the National Endowment for the Arts, so that was exciting. And our very own Scott Shanklin Peterson became the deputy director for the National Endowments for the Arts. So we had a lot to celebrate. So we hope to create something very similar. We don't anticipate an exhibition at the White House. We don't.
No, we don't think it's not the same.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to do that. Now, what happened to that White House collection is, of course, you know what happened in 1993 was the Clinton administration. And they did carry forth the exhibition at the White House, and that collection is now housed at the Clinton Library.
In Little Rock, Arkansas. And in Little Rock, Arkansas. Yes. And I'd also like to say, one thing we really appreciate is the fact that the first Year of American Craft was bipartisan, that both the Republicans and the Democrats participated. So we're hoping that the same can happen this time.
So you'll be hearing about this project, and we hope that those of you who can help join in the celebration will do so. So start saving a space in your 2026 calendars. We know our good friend at the Columbia Museum will do that.
Oh, yeah.
We're hoping to involve the Columbia Museum of Art.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you again so much for being here. This program has been recorded tonight, so you can find it online if you'd like to share it with anyone that you know that might benefit from hearing what we talked about tonight. And the exhibition is open till 8 o'clock. Please go down and enjoy. Cocktail bar is still open, and thank you all again for being here. Thank you. And check out your local listings for more Craft in America series coming up.